there are certain well-to-do people who appear in the Gospels and Acts. We have Lazarus, who is on side. We have Nicodemus, who is on side. We have Joseph of Arimathea, who is definitely on side. We have here Gamaliel. He appears in the life of St. Paul as well, for it seems that St. Paul was tutored at his feet. He is wise. He tries to defend the Lord, but here he is also defending the apostles. Indeed, he brings it to a high level, the action of God, and he gives a good rule of thumb for discernment of spirits. We would do well to listen to that and take it on board. He concludes his discourse, "So in the present case I tell you, keep away from these men and let them alone. For if this plan or this undertaking is of men, it will fail. But if it is of God, you will not be able to overthrow them. You might even be found opposing God." Strange enough, they listened. So they took his advice. And when they had called in the apostles, they beat them and charged them not to speak in the name of Jesus and let them go. Years ago, I was asked to write an article on something which was starting, and I concluded with this very quotation. As it happens, that small foundation didn't really last, at least in the place where it was made. One can see foundations that could go well, could go very well, but they're always a danger in the initial stages, and one needs the security of wise men of the church to keep things well balanced. With regard to leaders who are well balanced, we have one on this day. His life is very curious. Anselm. He was born in 1033, far away from where he ended up. In the north of Italy he was born, in Piedmont, and he wanted to become a monk. And with all the fervour of a postulant, he went to Aosta and entered the monastery there, following the rule of St. Benedict. But under pressure from his father, he had to leave the monastic life. After an unsettled period, the youth fled to France and entered the Benedictine monastery at Bec. Bec-en-Loing is still there. It's a double monastery. They have the nuns as well. Where he eventually became abbot and gained renown as a preacher and a reformer of the monastic life. During this period he wrote his best theological works, which exerted a powerful influence and established him as a theological master in the late Middle Ages. Following one who had gone before him on the same path, Lanfranc, he became Archbishop of Canterbury and was involved in the struggle over lay investiture with King William II. That involved the secular authority handing on the symbols of authority to the bishop. It belonged to the church to do that. We know that the martyr of Canterbury, the great Thomas, also had the same struggle against the king that he had previously served so well. this same King William refused to recognize Pope Urban II, and twice Anselm went into exile, in 1097 and in 1103. Finally, he was able to return to his see, where he died on this day in 1109. He is an important figure. Indeed, we were studying him in philosophy because his argument for God, the ontological argument, is an interesting one in itself. His famous phrase, fides querens intellectum, is interesting. Faith seeking understanding. Credo ut intelligam. I believe that I may understand. It gives the tone of theology. Theology is done spiritually on one's knees. He contributed greatly to the development of systematic theology, but always with an emphasis on the contemplative and spiritual dimension. And in that vein, he writes to God about God. The proslogion is addressed to the Creator himself. St. Anselm's theological heritage became the patrimony of scholasticism. We should note the primacy that Anselm gave to wisdom in the study and teaching of theology, which is the point of greatest convergence between St. Anselm and St. Thomas Aquinas, who was slightly later in time. Indeed, when St. Anselm entered the Benedictine family, the Dominican family didn't yet exist. There is a parallel between one area of their work, these two great doctors of the Church. It's the trying to prove the existence of God. Now, the 5 ways of St. Thomas are based on the philosophy of Aristotle. The approach of Anselm is very different. He defines God as the one greater than which nothing can be imagined. And therefore he has, ipso facto, existence as well. And he goes into the beauty of the king that he is trying to define. My soul, have you found what you were looking for? You were looking for God, and you have discovered that he is the supreme being, and that you could not possibly imagine anything more perfect. You have discovered that this supreme being is life itself, light, wisdom, goodness, eternal blessedness, and blessed eternity. He is everywhere, and he is timeless. He also has a profound analysis of the incarnation and the reasons for it. Cur Deus homo? Why God should be man. And he also defined the orthodox doctrine on the filioque. This was a burning issue at the time. The split happened between East and West in 1054. The filioque is that clause that was added progressively in the West regarding the way that the Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son. He defended this when he attended the Council of Bari in Italy in 1102, and that place, of course, would be a pivotal point for communication with the Eastern world. We still have, to this day, the body of St. Nicholas there, and he's the patron saint of Russia. There is one element that unites specifically the teaching of this great saint and contemplative and monk and abbot to the gentle and profound spiritual and theological teaching of the recently deceased Joseph Ratzinger. He has a way of approaching the existence of God and proving that existence in a very particular way, which is referred to as the via pulchritudinis, the way of beauty. It is akin to one of the arguments that we find in St. Thomas Aquinas, but it develops it in a specific area. We observe in creation not only order, but specifically beauty. And as one observes that in several realms, art, nature, music, and so on, one cannot but calculate that upstream there is a fontal beauty, beauty par excellence. That actually is found embryonically in Platonic teaching as well, ho theos, the God. And one in pre-Christian philosophy does deduce that there must be therefore upstream somebody ordering, and that person must be ordered and must be the beautiful and the true. And all else is a reflection of that origin. So too, but specifically in Joseph Ratzinger, we have that element of observing well the proof that's before our eyes. And specifically in the realm of beauty, in the auditive realm, it is such that it is compelling. For the effect of beauty in harmony is divine. It arouses a harmony in the deepest level of the person, which is a participation in the numinous. The numinous is talking to us to a power shared with the angels, who also spend their time creating it. And it was not lost with the curse that came with the fall of man. It's a bit of Eden that has remained for the consolation of mankind. And so it is that we see in this complete person, Anselm of Canterbury, Anselm of Bec-et-Loin, Anselm of Aosta in the north of Italy, that the praising of the Creator in the monastic life and the creation of solemn liturgy is very much a work that requires the best of man and is a locus of encounter with the one that is adored. That we do well to remember. For if that is the case, when we do the utmost to produce on earth the glory given by the angels to God, close to us, then we are at home with them. And the very psalm of this day reminds us of that. There is one thing I ask of the Lord, to live in the house of the Lord. To live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to savour the sweetness of the Lord, to behold his temple. Give praise to his name. Jesus is the Lord of the earth. He is the King of creation. Hallelujah, hallelujah, give thanks to the risen Lord. Hallelujah, hallelujah, give praise to His name. Spread the good news of the earth. Jesus has died and has risen. Hallelujah, hallelujah, give thanks to the risen Lord. Hallelujah, hallelujah, give praise to His name. We have been crucified with Christ, now we shall live forever.
Hallelujah, hallelujah, give thanks to the risen Lord. Hallelujah, hallelujah,
give praise to